You know who I am? Back before winter set in, there were some misunderstandings. Regrettable ones. But I think we all have a better idea of who we're dealing with. You follow me?
So God of War Ragnarok is finally out, and there's one thing that people are kind of fussing over. Or at the very least, something that's become a bit of a point of contention for some players is the portrayal of Odin. Some have likened this portrayal to that of like a mob boss, and some have even gone as far as to say he reminds them of Saul Goodman. And while I definitely agree on those comparisons, I don't think it's a bad thing. In fact, I think that this portrayal of Odin is actually kind of brilliant. First off, I definitely think it fits in line with everything we know about Odin, at least from Mimir's perspective and all the stories we heard in the first game. And secondly, these aren't the Greek gods of the first trilogy. They're not these chiseled giants or crazy god emperors like Zeus. Now, I'm not saying everybody expected Odin to be like Zeus, but I'm assuming they expected him to be more like like a stoic and cunning, yet also mysterious force who probably almost never speaks, which is like how he was depicted in the Northmen, which I actually loved. But that really only works for like one or two scenes. If we just have Odin stoically staring at nothing and just not saying anything, that's not intimidating. That would just make him look like a senior citizen staring off in space because they didn't take the right meds or some shit. Or I'm assuming some people expected him to be like the portrayal in the Marvel movies where he's this stern grandfatherly character who just disappears into a bright white light, where he doesn't do much other than just stand around and occasionally drop the stereotypical nugget of wisdom that characters like him usually drop in Marvel movies. Although I guess I should give him credit for at least mentioning some of the atrocities Odin supposedly committed. But in those movies, like I said, he's basically a non-character. I'm also a really big fan of Mads Mikkelsen's portrayal of Odin in Valhalla Rising. Definitely an underrated movie that I haven't seen in a while and probably should rewatch, and maybe even we'll do a video about. I'm getting way off topic here. We're here to talk about Godfather Odin from God of War Ragnarok. We hear about him all throughout the first game from the perspective of Mimir and little codex entries, and of course dialogue from other characters like Freya or Balder paint a pretty clear picture of just who this version of Odin is. And his portrayal as a sort of Nordic Tony Soprano, I think, sort of reflects all this. This is the same guy who sought a giantess's hand in marriage but was refused. So in response, Odin then tricked her into killing her own father out of pettiness, which inadvertently led to her own death. If that doesn't sound Tony Soprano-esque, I mean, I don't know what else is. He also cursed Freya to be stuck in Midgard and to never be able to hurt a living creature simply because she left him, which also served as an added layer of protection against her should she turn vengeful. Freya got exiled and shunned by both her own people and the Aesir, and Odin gained one extremely capable, albeit somewhat insane, henchman to serve as a tracker and warrior, who now possessed a hatred of his mother that would rival Kratos' own hatred towards Zeus. Odin might be a pretty bad dad, but he's a pretty ruthless and successful businessman, all things considered. He values his kids not as family, but more as assets, if you will. His family is essentially a business he's built up, and his offspring are essentially bred to be his enforcers. I mean, look how he refers to his children, namely Balder from the first game. He's less mad that Kratos killed Balder because he was his son, and more mad that he eliminated his best tracker, his closer, as he put it. Honestly, that's one of my favorite scenes in the game, and it happens in like the first 20 minutes. But it's a great example to show just how this version of Odin views his kids. They're essentially a means to an end, very powerful tools he could use to get what he wants. Although when he says that he treats Thor the way he does because it's the only thing this brute would understand, I'm inclined to believe him, although I'm sure Thor is only this way because of Odin's parenting. So I think that the fact he's portrayed like a mob boss works rather well here because essentially the Aesir gods are his mafia, and he utilizes them as such. I mean, mafias also treat its members like family. In fact, they're oftentimes called families. This is never more evident than with how he is towards Thrud or Atreus. He's this warm grandfatherly character, which is likely how he probably was to Balder and his siblings. Probably not Thor, because Thor was probably a problem child from the start. But he's super warm and complimentary towards these kids, encourages them, never really scolds them too hard. He probably does this so that when they grow up, he has their complete loyalty. Similar to how De Niro's character from Goodfellas was toward the kid versions of Pesci and Ray Liotta. But yeah, I have no real problems with Odin's portrayal. I mean, all they really needed to get right was this crippling desire to prevent Ragnarok to save his own life. And I feel like as long as they got that right, they can do any kind of characterization they wanted with Odin as long as it worked well with that part of his lore. Which again is why I like this version of him, because it's so different than every other depiction of this character that we've seen in other franchises or other games. I would go so far as to call it refreshing. But hey, I totally understand that all these things, especially depictions of mythological characters, are super subjective. I totally get if you don't like this version of him, but I think it's a perfect depiction. It's just really hard to do this video without spoiling main story events, so I'll probably do a second one about Odin from like a Odin explained type of perspective or something, I don't know. Or the many depictions of Odin could be a good video idea. And like many mob bosses, Odin was extremely paranoid about anything and everything that he believed could possess even the slightest threat at his rule of the 9 realms. He also jealously guarded all of the treasures he'd accumulated in his time. Of course, his treasure weren't really material, it was all just knowledge and secrets of the other 9 realms and their people that he had stolen over his vast career of, well, just being Odin. And how he acquired all of this secret knowledge is even better. He pretty much tricked or duped anybody smarter than him or anybody who had secrets that he didn't have or secrets that he desired, and then unceremoniously disposed of them after he'd gotten what he wanted. We've also gone over briefly how petty Odin could be, and I think that's rather understated as well, because when he first met Mimir, the old horned goat actually outsmarted him. Of course, Odin spared Mimir and offered him a chance to be his advisor, and Mimir would actually commit a number of atrocities in Odin's name before falling out of favor from the one-eyed bastard. It was at this point that Odin had Mimir imprisoned in that tree that we found him in the first game, and if the daily torture wasn't enough, to add insult to injury, he also removed one of Mimir's eyes. And Odin isn't like depicted as cartoonishly evil or comic book evil or anything like that in my opinion either, at least in God of War. In fact, it's implied by Mimir that he truly did love his first wife, Thor's mom, and that her death kind of shook him to the core, and then when he heard the prophecy of his own death, it kind of drove him, well, those two things kind of drove him to be who he currently is. Shit, it might have even happened in that instant, because I believe when he heard this prophecy, this vision of him supposedly dying during Ragnarok, as well as the implication that there was nothing he could do about it, he instantly killed the person who told it to him. Which itself kind of embodies one of the main themes of the game. Can you change a pre-written destiny? Is it smart to go against it, or is it foolish? This is addressed with numerous characters that I won't get into here, but it's definitely a reoccurring theme in this game. And I think that them depicting him as a mob boss style character is completely in line with everything they've told us about this same character in the first God of War game and everything we see in Ragnarok. Plus, it separates him from previous god kings like Zeus. And I've actually seen some people mention, like, well, why doesn't he look like his statue? But I mean, the same could be said about Thor. I mean, he doesn't look like his statue. In his statue, he actually looks like he's in shape. And then when we meet him, he's a fat dude played by Opie from Sons of Anarchy. And I mean, if we really want to get nitpicky, Thor doesn't even look the same as he looked in the ending of God of War 2018. That could be chalked up to it being Atreus' dream and that just being his idea of what Thor looked like, and I think that works for that. And with the statues, it could just be that they were commissioned to make these gods look a little more, I don't know, flattering, godlike, and less like fat, drunken idiots. I've seen some people just like hate on the dialogue in this game as a whole, even going so far as to call it Joss Whedon-esque, which I think is going a little too far for anything. Joss Whedon only did like one cool thing, Firefly, and even that is debatable. Everything else he's touched has been kind of cringy at best. I'm not hating on you if you like Joss Whedon, it's not really for me. It's too much goofy comedy. And when I see people comparing God of War to that, I'm like, well, the subject matter of God of War is already a lot heavier than the stuff that Whedon usually covers. And I really just think it has something to do with everybody expecting everybody to talk in these, well, Scandinavian accents, because it is set in Norse mythology. They'll probably use old-timey sounding dialect, And I would argue that some characters straight up do. I mean, Kratos doesn't talk like a normal guy on the street, and neither does Mimir. Although I won't argue about Atreus, Sindri, and Brock all sounding like, modern day American dudes, and even Freya herself to a lesser degree. Baldur as well, honestly, all of the Aesir gods. And I think that's another great way to separate them from the Greek gods like Kratos. And it also explains why Mimir sounds and talks so differently than everybody else, because he's a god from a whole different pantheon from Celtic mythology. But at the end of the day, this is Kratos isekai'd into a Norse mythology world, where they've already changed a number of other things. For example, if you've played Ragnarok, you've probably done the Lingbaker Island quest, and a Lingbaker in Norse mythology is this whale that would disguise the top of itself as an island and then drown and eat the sailors that would come and land on the island. In the game, it's a creature that was imprisoned by Mimir to give as a gift to Odin because its fat could be used as lantern oil. But I think that quest is a great example of how the game designers and writers took their own creative liberties with Norse mythology and made it more meaningful and more impactful. They used the tools they had to enrich the story, and I like that, while also making it their own. Because as I previously stated, Norse mythology has been depicted a number of ways, especially recently, and it's nice to see something that genuinely feels different. Plus, I think all the voice acting is really well done. I mean, Kratos is excellent as always, Mimir also excellent. Brock is basically my favorite character. I think he's always great to hear. Basically every character is well portrayed. I do genuinely think, though, that if Odin in the game had been given a Scandinavian accent, that no one would be complaining about him. And I think we should be thankful for this portrayal, because if we didn't get this one, inevitably we would have gotten a Bond villain-esque Odin, which is something that I think would have been far more of a disservice to the character than what we got. Plus, I think it's great that this is a new take on Odin that we haven't seen before. It's not going to be just like the mythology, of course. And honestly, why would we want it to be? So we could predict everything that could happen? Or exactly how somebody's going to be, and if they're not that way, we can nitpick it to all hell. I understand everything is subjective, and not liking something is fine. I don't like a lot of stuff. But to get hung up over what is, in my opinion, a great portrayal and performance, and a pretty goddamn great game, is a bit nitpicky and biased. But that's just my opinion. Don't judge me for it. Or judge me for it. That is your prerogative. But I don't think his portrayal as sort of mob boss-esque, or even just how most of the characters talk as sort of Americanized, is anything near immersion breaking like I've seen people claim. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it's no more immersion breaking than when in a show like Chernobyl, all the actors are speaking in British accents. Well, except for Stellan Skarsgård. When they should be speaking, full Russian, and it should be in subtitles. But then it becomes documentarian-esque and not really a miniseries. You want people to watch the show, not reading the subtitles the entire time. And I know Narcos is probably the exception in that department, but I'm getting extremely off base here and off subject. I haven't even finished this game yet. I just wanted to talk about this because I saw some rumblings about it. I'm really enjoying the game so far. I need to put up my first impressions video because I'm not super far into it. I've been busy with other stuff, but I've just been diving into it and been enjoying the hell out of the game. I got that mystery lore video coming up for you guys tomorrow, I believe. And then after that, I think the first impressions video, and then I think maybe, just maybe, the Ranny video might finally be up. But as always, I hope you guys found this video somewhat informative, and if you liked it, please like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. And if you like hearing me ramble, then please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out, especially now that Elden Ring kind of content is sort of falling off. I'm never going to stop making it, but I am going to start covering other stuff a little more frequently now. But that being said, I have a bunch of Elden Ring projects that are almost done or are in various stages of completion that are going to end up taking precedence over some of my new topics, so definitely expect more Elden Ring and FromSoftian content for sure. But I've rambled on long enough. Let's have our outro and blow this joint. I've also got some New Vegas stuff coming out. It was supposed to come out a lot sooner, but it got pushed back. But see you guys next time, and as always, be safe.